We have, in the police department, we have a TV that's, we will go in and turn on the news station and watch the weather nonstop when the weather starts becoming a threat. And just like every other day in May, because of our history of so many tornadoes, anytime they say that there's a tornado risk this afternoon, you're already on heightened awareness and you're listening to the news and you want to hear the weather. And I had a doctor's appointment scheduled on the north side that afternoon, and I was going to leave work early. And I was at the station getting ready to leave and go to my doctor's appointment. The chief and everybody were gathered around the television, and I walked into the break room and looked, and the weather was talking about that the potential for a tornado was growing greater with every minute. So I told Chief, I said, I'm not going to go to my doctor's appointment. I'm going to go back out on the street. And I went out on the street. Well, the weather just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So I went and I made it down. I was going to go down and secure the interstate at Indian Hills to stop the northbound traffic from driving into the tornado, because it was obvious it was on the ground and it was approaching the outer city limits and more. I saw that the Highway Patrol had already secured the interstate, and I turned around and I blocked off the service road. And then I saw the tornado coming, and so I pulled out my camera, my cell phone, and I started videoing the tornado. And I noticed that it just didn't seem like it was moving. And they were talking about how intense it was and the debris ball and everything. And I could see, and I knew about which part of the city. I knew there were elementary schools, there were shopping centers, there were convenience stores, there was a trailer park. There were so many things in that area where there was a large congregations of people. And one of the newscasters at that time had said, he made a mistake of where he was, and he said the tornado was going through Southwest 134th in Pennsylvania, through the intersection traveling northeast. Well, I knew that I lived northeast of Southwest 134th in Pennsylvania. I picked up my phone and tried to call real quick to see if my family was okay, and I got nothing, got no answer, got no text or anything. And so automatically I'm in the mode, I'm watching this tornado, and I don't know if my family's safe, I don't know if my house is destroyed and all this. But that's on my mind, but I have to put it out of my mind because there's thousands of people here in harm's way that I need to be able to respond to. And after the tornado moved through, I left and was heading towards Plaza Towers, because I know there's schools, there's shopping centers, there's restaurants, there's Walmart. All of that is in the path of this tornado. And I heard Sergeant Snavely, one of my patrol sergeants, talking about he was at the school and we had children trapped and he needed more assistance there. And Sergeant Snavely and I went over, and citizens, parents, and everybody else was already there at the school digging. And we started digging, and then the fire department arrived, and Sergeant Snavely and I were digging, and the first fire company that came in. And finally we, along with everybody else, we finally found a tunnel. And as we got this tunnel, the hole was just barely big enough to get kids out of. And we started pulling those kids out one by one, and they had multiple injuries, everything, but we got them out and everything. And then we started, of course, over the course of time, my officers that I'd called for help were responding. We had Oklahoma City officers responding, citizens and everything else. Then we just kept digging, and then finally we got 9 kids out, the teacher, and we shut everybody down, told everybody to be quiet, tried to get as quiet as possible. And we didn't hear any other sounds, but we knew we had other kids that were unaccounted for. And at that time, it realistically sat in on us that, oh, we probably got some deceased victims here. And then we moved some rubble and we could see the back of one of the kids. And one of the firemen moved some rubble and he could see the back, and he pointed to me and Captain Murdoch, and he said, this one's deceased. At that point, we knew that it was going to get more grim from there. They brought the cadaver dog to me, and by being the watch commander, I assumed the role of being incident commander for the police side for the Plaza Towers area of the disaster. The cadaver dog started locating places where bodies were, and they were underneath this wall. It was a cinder block wall that had fallen. And so we got sledgehammers, and we knew that wall wasn't that strong, so we couldn't physically move the wall, so we just took hammers and started banging away. As we started breaking the wall down, we just would throw the chunks off and everything, and then we located the first child. And we kind of just lined up between where we were digging and up to the mortuary, temporary mortuary that we'd established. And the firemen and everybody were down there, and we just kind of made a line. Well, Sergeant Snavely was right beside me, and as we would extract a child, he would hand it to me. And it was generally this way. The arm would be underneath the shoulders and head, and then the legs would be there. We would just kind of like hand them over. And as we went through, there was one child that, I guess it was because of the position and the way she was. Her name was Janae Hornsby, a little 9-year-old girl. And because of the way Sergeant Snavely had to grab her, he had to grab her from behind, underneath her armpits. So when he turned and handed her to me, I reached for her, and I was looking at her precious little face, just eye to eye. And I had to hold her and then pass her off. And to this day, her face is still just ingrained in my mind. And, she's the one that, all the kids meant a lot to us, but she's the one that sticks with me. And so after we found out we had removed the 7 children, we ran the cadaver dog back through, and we couldn't locate anything else. And we had probably moved everything that we could move by hand. It was time for the urban search and rescue. And we had moved all 7 children into the temporary morgue. We went in there, and just so happens that day they had given out the yearbooks. It was towards the end of school. They had given out the yearbooks, and we got a copy of the yearbooks. And you have to be so careful. You can't just release the victims' names without positive identification. But we went through and we tried our best to match the yearbook picture with the victims that we had laying there. And we pretty much compiled a list of who we thought the deceased children were. Well, I left to go talk to the principal and everything, and a Norman police officer who was on the scene came to me, and he said, "Captain," he goes, "I've got this man over here, and he's causing all kinds of problems because you guys have stopped digging and everything." And I said, "I'll talk to him." So I go over there, and I immediately recognized him. I don't know which child's father it was, but I remember he was the one that was down there with us and helping us, and he was the one that was crawling in the hole, helping us to pull the kids out. And I started talking to him, and he was so upset. He goes, "Why are you stopping? My daughter's still missing. My daughter's still missing, you know." And I said, I said, we've done everything we can possibly do. We've moved every piece of rubble. I said, we haven't given up. I said, we're waiting on heavy equipment to come in to move the larger pieces. I said that we can't move by hand. And he said, well, let me in there, I'll dig. He goes, my little girl's missing. And I, in the back of my head, knew that his daughter was dead, but I couldn't tell him that. So I had to tell him and try to reassure him that everything's okay, sir. We're going to do the best we can. You know, don't give up, you know, and everything else. When fully in the back of my mind, I knew I was lying to him because I'd already seen his daughter. His daughter was dead, but I couldn't tell him that. I gathered my guys around and I said, look, you know, we've spent so much time here. We still need to fan out around this area and see if we can locate some more people and see if everybody's okay. Well, in the course of us fanning out in less than a 2-block area, we found 7 more deceased people. They were all adults. They were all killed in their houses, except for one man, and one man was, the only way we found him was he was lying face down in a creek and he had on jeans. And I can remember seeing his hip and seeing the pocket of a pair of jeans where he was floating. The rest of his body was submerged. Even though you have to do all of this, you have to get involved in everything else. So on my way to Plaza Tower Schools, I'm trying to call my family and everything. And my son, Stephen, had just graduated from EMT school. And what I did not know was he had grabbed his trauma bag, and he had started at 4th and Telephone and by Little River Park and just started walking south. And while we were digging everything, again, in the back of my mind, I'm like, is my house gone? Is my family okay? You know, all this, I can't reach them on the cell phone. And while we were on the rubble, on the debris area and digging and trying to extricate the victims, one of my guys goes, hey, Captain, isn't that your son? And I looked, and he came walking out of the rubble carrying his trauma bag. And I looked, and it was just one of the greatest feelings I had, because that was my first indication that my family was still alive and they were okay. I didn't care about the house, but when I saw him walking out of that rubble, man, it was just, I just can't even explain how I felt inside, because even though I was giving all I could to the victims that were in there, and I knew that these were all other people's children, you still don't forget about your children, you know. You don't forget about your family. We saved 12 people, Sergeant Snave and I, but we lost 14 people. 7 children in the school and 7 people in their houses surrounding the area that we found that were dead afterwards as a result of the tornado.